Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and we're on day 21 of a build a day until they announce DLC. That's right, we're doing a build or build-related video every day until they announce DLC. And for today's video, we're going to be focusing on Carian Grandeur. Carian Grandeur is a fantastic Ash of War that you can put on virtually any weapon or the majority of weapons in Elden Ring, and it's a fantastic one to use as a mage to do massive damage. For this, we were able to come up with a fantastic overall well-rounded build with some basic buffs that does massive damage. We're on Journey 16, by the way, and the damage is crazy good. So for Carian Grandeur, and I hope I'm saying that right, I looked it up, it seems to be pronounced Grandeur, but anyway, for this build, it really does a fantastic amount of damage, and you may see some videos where you can buff it like crazy and even one-hit some stuff, but instead of doing a ridiculous number of buffs, we're going to keep the buffs rather simple and opt for instead a well-rounded build. But I am going to show you some stuff that you can do in terms of buffs, and obviously seppuku, poison proccing, all that stuff can up the damage on this. The damage threshold for Carian Grandeur is very high, and it's a really powerful Ash of War. It can be charged up to 3 times to give you an 80% damage boost, I think, in total prior to buffs. And in many ways, this is like a magic version of Royal Knight's Resolve, where the damage threshold is very high, and then adding even some basic buffs to it can do a lot of damage in general, and even on New Game Plus 7, we can chew through boss HP. And the damage is quite impressive on this. This is one of those things like Night Comet that I did not too far back, where the damage threshold, as I mentioned, is extremely high. It's also very easy to use and learn, and if you're a mage and you haven't tried this, this is definitely an Ash of War you're going to want to check out. We're going to take on several different bosses in this video. We're going to show you, I think I already showed mobs at the very beginning of the video. It's just okay for mobs, but the damage to bosses is intense. You're going to want to see it. We're going to poison proc it, buff it a little bit, see what it can do. You can see here we're going to add some buffs to it, see how much damage we can get out of Carian Grandeur. So for this one, I added the poison procs. I ended up using the black dumpling and proccing that for the extra 10%. And I wanted to see how much damage I could do to the Chronic Tree Sentinel, which has a decent amount of resistance in general. See how much damage I could do by putting Terra Magica down at the end. And the damage was quite good. That actually is pretty reasonable damage there. He's obviously going to phase transition, so that gives us a free chance to hit him again. Not a one-shot, unless you consider he has 2 phases. I guess he does have 2. But even so, the damage is impressive. With 80 intelligence, we can do a ridiculous amount. We're going to show you what to do at 150 as well to get completely comparable damage. For those wondering what item this is that we're about to use, it's Margit's Shackle. There's a shackle for Margit and Mog. You can get them throughout the game. Mog's is below the capital. Margit's is bought from patches, and it allows you to stun the bosses up to 2 times in the first phase for both. In this instance here, we're able to do a lot of damage on the initial contact, and then afterwards we can phase transition with the shackle, hit him again, and you get a little less damage here, but he's going to go down fairly quickly. And once again, Carian Grandeur does a lot of damage. It is very impressive as an Ash of War set up for a mage. And yeah, Morgoth went down fairly quickly. We're going to show you what you can do, as I mentioned, to add to this to buff it some more. But we're going to come up with an awesome base build that's good for everybody and a well-rounded build for Carian Grandeur. Interestingly enough, I hadn't actually used Carian Grandeur until I did this video, so I had a lot of learning to do in just a night's time. Since we're doing a build every single day, I didn't have a lot of time to experiment with it, and I still think I came up with a well-rounded, powerful build. But yes, this was an Ash of War that I didn't really use too much, didn't really know it very well, honestly didn't even remember where to find it. It was a little difficult to find in Carian Manor, but once I had it, I ended up really enjoying it. It was a lot of fun, reminded me a lot of the damage like Night Comet has, and it's just ridiculous to use on the majority of bosses in Elden Ring. And most of the time, you're able to 2-hit the majority of bosses, even on New Game Plus 7. On base game or New Game Plus, you're going to be able to one-hit or one-shot a lot of the bosses as long as you can get to at least 60 intelligence and then end up using this setup. It's going to do a lot of damage because Carian Grandeur has that high threshold, that high damage threshold. It's very easy to use, very easy to understand. Charge it up to 3 times for maximum damage, and then slam down for, as we mentioned, a ridiculous amount of damage as it shreds bosses' HP. And it's easy to place once you understand it too. Of course, you're going to want Terra Magica for that extra 35% boost, as you will with most spells, but even if you don't have that, it's very impressive. and we were going to talk about how it scales and whatnot. And I'm using the Gargoyle's Greatsword because it was just fun to have something that was kind of hard hitting. But the interesting thing about Carian Grandeur is the Ash of War doesn't scale with anything other than weapon level and your intelligence stats. So you can put it on the dagger, like a dagger, get the same amount of damage, and then have a light equipment load, which is awesome. Or if you're like me and you want to use something a little heavy for just general battle, you can go with something like the Gargoyle's Greatsword, which is something that I don't normally use. It was kind of fun to throw it on. But yeah, dagger is excellent with this because the damage is going to be the same. Yeah, which is why a lot of videos that you'll see it on a dagger because it's obviously more convenient to have the light equipment load. But for me personally, I just threw it on the Gargoyle's Greatsword because I'm used to the medium roll anyway. And I wanted something, like I said, that was a little harder hitting, that if I ran into mobs and I didn't want to go down with using, you know, Carian Grandeur and just have to charge it all the way and all that, I decided to just be able to hit stuff with something hard. And the Gargoyle's Greatsword worked fine for that. This also has a good amount of range too, like as it builds up and slams down, it will hit most of the time. It has a fair amount of range, kind of small to medium range, but even so, it's going to hit more often than not. As long as you're generally in the area or somewhat close, you're going to hit with Carian Grandeur, and if you're under Terra Magica, or over Terra Magica rather, you're going to do a ridiculous amount of damage just based on those two buffs because like I said, this is a really fantastic Ash of War. It's a great thing to use as a mage and it's very easy to understand and get high damage out of. Yeah, Carian Grandeur ended up being one that was really fun for me. I had a lot of fun with this one, much like I did with Night Comet. I was able to use it and buff it a little bit, kind of add some stuff to it, and as I mentioned, come up with a well-rounded build. But I definitely want to revisit this one down the line too for more buffs because it does have such a high damage threshold. And as I'm on this run doing a build a day, the only issue is I only really had one night to use Carian Grandeur for the first time and get used to it. And it's a very interesting Ash of War that was a lot of fun to use. Now let's get into equipment. Now for equipment, we have any weapon plus 25 that can use Carian Grandeur. We have Lucette's Staff. We have a Seppuku Sword if we want to bring our HP down for the low health proccing. We have the Black Dumpling and Mushroom Crown if need be. Godfrey Icon, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then we're using the Magic tier as well. Now, my mage is level 200, but this is so easy to do at 150. You just need 60 intelligence to get really a lot of damage out of it, and then a lot of the stats are up to you. Whatever stats you need on the weapon you're using, if it's a dagger, it's going to be very low stat requirements, so this is very easy to do at level 150. This is one we're going to revisit, though. This is something I want to really buff up to extreme levels eventually, so if you follow my channel and you sub to my channel, then you're going to find out down the line what we're able to do with this when we add even more to it. But for the base build, obviously, it's going to include some buffs, and then eventually we can add even more damage to this. Now, I did a mess of buffs here, and it turned into a lot of stuff, but I finally came up with a base build that I liked for it in just a night's time, and for me, I did need the 33 Faith. You can save 10 levels and get that to 23, and then use the Faith tier for buffs, because we're going to proc the Black Dumpling for that 10%, and we're going to use Howl Shabriri for that 25% as well. Since we're using the Ritual Swords Talisman and the Magic Scorpion Charm, we're going to heal up after, and then we're going to drink our tier, which has the Magic tier in it. We're going to use Golden Vow, then we're going to use Howl Shabriri. There's a lot of damage being added up here. The last thing we're going to do is cast Terra Magica, and then we're going to charge fully and use Carian Grandeur for massive damage, and it really is quite awesome. And if you want to low health proc this, you swap out the Ritual Swords Talisman with the Red Feathered Branch Sword, and then you can swap out the Magic Scorpion Charm for the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation if you want to poison proc this too, and swap the Black Dumpling for the Mushroom Crown. For those familiar with the channel, because it's generic damage, this would be along the same lines as the lightning build that I do in terms of if you want to go to extremes to buff it. But for me personally, I like the Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then just proccing the Black Dumpling, Golden Vow, Howl Shabriri, and then Terra Magica. This is more or less a base build with some buffs to make it powerful, but this is one we're going to revisit. If you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel if you love overpowered PvE builds. There's a ton of awesome builds on my channel. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys there.